So let's talk about artificial intelligence and smart cities. Whether you are a corporation, a government agency, a nonprofit, the intention that you have for AI is really important. And in Singapore, which is considered one of the smartest cities in the world, the purpose of AI is a high quality of life for its citizens. In fact, it was in 2014 that the previous Prime Minister Lee, said that a smart city is an outstanding place for people to live, work, and play in, where the human spirit flourishes. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. And I'm going to zoom in on one particular group of people and show you what that means. Now, Singapore is one of the fastest aging populations in the world. 47% of Singaporeans will be 65 or older by 2050. And we want to look after our elderly. And we want to use the best technology in the world, whether it's Internet of Things, data, AI, whatever it is, to help them live a great health span. Now, if you're a techie, you would say, great idea. Let's put cameras and sensors everywhere. Because one of the things that happens to senior citizens, and if you have parents or grandparents, you would know, is that they fall. And then they need surgery on their hips or their legs, and that creates a downward spiral in their health. So you could actually put sensors in the home. You would be able to alert the family if they get hurt. You'd be able to call an ambulance. You could have videos. There are even pills you could ingest that are coming out that have sensors in them and can tell your daughter or your doctor or your ex-wife whether you have taken the pill or not. Maybe the ex-wife won't feel that bad if you haven't. But that's not the way to look at it. That's jumping ahead into the AI. What you want to do is step back. And let's think about the biggest problems the elderly face. Yes, it is injuries. But you and I know that the elderly also die of loneliness. And in Singapore, when they looked at other things, they found car accidents was another problem when it came to the aging population. They were the majority of people who'd get injured in accidents. So let's step back now. Yes, you need to protect them from injuries. So Singapore has public housing. It's subsidized for all of us Singaporeans. And for the elderly, there are apartments made which are equipped with a senior panic button. They do have the sensors in the floor around the house. They are constructed in a way that's modular and easy to move around. And as the number of elderly citizens reaches almost 1 million by 2030, more and more will be living in these high-tech apartments, which will provide a way for them to get help when they need and prevent them from falling and getting injured. But you also need something else, right? You need what we call a kampung. A kampung is a Malay term. It means a village. It means what we are right now, a community that engages with each other, that has a community spirit where neighbors interact daily. And unfortunately, our way of dealing with senior citizens in the West especially is to put them far away in elderly senior homes. But in Singapore, we don't believe that's the right way to reach our elderly and take care of them. We are building new community centers, subsidized housing that provides comprehensive facilities and intergenerational bonding and community spirit. That means, if you look at this map, that it's not only about the medical center, it's not only about the elderly apartments, but it's also got a fitness corner and playground. It's got a rain garden. It's got active aging hub where they can do yoga. It's got preschools. It's got innovation centers. And throughout all of this, there is technology, there's robots, there's AI, but you don't see that. It's green, it's lovely. And even if not there nearby, you can place these elderly homes near playgrounds and look at the joy that the elderly feel. And isn't that what we want? We want joy from technology. And let's go to the last thing. You need less traffic so that accidents don't happen. So entire new neighborhoods are being built that are entirely car-free, that have autonomous vehicles that will take them from one kampung, or little village, to another. They're green, they're car light. Sustainability is really important. But look at the technology in it. 42,000 homes will feature in this car-free town center, and it will have vertical farming. Now, vertical farming is necessary for Singapore because we import most of our food. But it also is a great way for the community to take care of the environment, and for the elderly especially, they spend a lot of time in these vertical farming communities. You're going to use cold water to pipe to homes, and that will generate carbon dioxide savings equivalent to taking 4,500 cars off the roads. You'll have smart lighting with Internet of Things. You will have telemedicine and personalized medicine recommendations being developed by doctors in our best universities. And then you will have robots collecting trash at the right time when a bin is full. So my point to you is that there's technology everywhere, but the beauty of technology and AI is that you don't see it, that you live in harmony with nature and with each other. And it is a matter of experimentation. You never want to have one product or one solution and just marry it to the exclusion of experimentation. Even cities should experiment. As long as they're designed with the right values, you can have several HDB towns, as we do, which is a Housing Development Board. You can have several experiments, and city mayors should be trying different things, and then nationally they should come together, share what they've learned, and begin to create an environment where the technology is not an end in itself, but it serves the people. And I specifically picked the elderly because they're ignored. And I think that this kind of ageism, sexism, racism, letting people just go out of the system as AI becomes this place where everybody has to be young and hip and fabulous, it doesn't work that way. We have a responsibility to our citizens. And technology is really there for governments to think before they take a step forward, before a single brick is laid, to think about what's best for the country, what's best for the city. And how would you do that? Well, one way to do it is to have a digital twin. And many cities now have a digital twin, actually. But you can see that Singapore spent $73 million on a digital twin of the entire city. And every single road was mapped out. All the buildings were mapped out. And the purpose was to have a real-life digital twin where you can simulate the kind of smart city investments you will be making. And as a result of that, before a single brick is laid, you can see, if I build a house here, a building here, what is that going to do to traffic? What is that going to do to heat? What is that going to do to pollution? How will pedestrians feel? What's the population density here? Are there a lot of elderly people? Are there children? And the investment in this digital twin is built on 14 core data sets, millions of images captured through LiDAR at the street level, images taken from the sky, 5 billion data points and more being collected and plotting in 3D, and amounting to more than 100 terabytes of data. And you do that, the government does that because it has a private, secure data and keeps the information private within its national boundaries. And it does it for the sole purpose of not building anything without thoughtfully thinking about it, without scenario planning. Like every other country on Earth, we are also facing climate change. And it's important for us that as we build, as we grow, as the economy flourishes, that we're careful and circumspect about where we invest our technology, our infrastructure, and we can see the heat that occurs as a result. For me, this is a smart city. That's what I love about being Singaporean. I'm a data geek, I'm a techie, I'm an AI engineer, but I'm not enthralled or mystified by it. I think if we use it for the right purpose, it works to benefit me, my family, my community. And that's why I want to talk to you about having this approach to serve people for a high quality of life. The next thing is, how do I make sure that each one of these people who have a great foundation now of good transport, good energy, good healthcare, good infrastructure, now each one of us deserves to have a great career. You and I deserve to thrive in this new AI era. And for that, some call Singapore an AI-first nation, which means we want to be AI-empowered. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, you need a national AI strategy. We've had it for a while. We're not the only ones. Australia has one, China has one, France has one, Estonia has one. I can name lots of them. New Zealand is working on one. It's really important to have a strategy and a game plan, because otherwise it becomes chaotic or haphazard, and it can be swayed by the wrong interests. And different countries have different priorities. In Singapore, we are very invested in talent development. In America, they're very invested also in research development. In China, there's a great emphasis on industry development. And then there's certain sectors that every country chooses. I saw your 2024 roadmap that New Zealand is working on, and rightly so. There was cultural sensitivity. There was an emphasis on agriculture. In Singapore, we have an emphasis on logistics and healthcare. This is the way it all comes together, and you can see it is for the public good. You know, we're all business people here. I'm a businesswoman, but we depend on our governments to look after us and to keep the public good before anything else. So let me tell you 3 things that the Singapore government is working on in terms of its AI strategy. The first thing is developing industry capabilities. Because if you could think of the smart city and the services it provides as the baseline, whether it is young children, elderly, middle-aged, that's the baseline. But now on top of that, you have to develop the economic engine. And here, Singapore has a great emphasis on practical applications. Like I said, some countries do R&D, and for Singapore, being pragmatic, we focus on practical use cases. Now, these 2 women with me at the Fortune AI conference are superpowers. They are rock stars. On the left is Sushan Tan. She is the Deputy CEO of DBS Bank, which is one of the largest banks in APAC. And she is going to be the next CEO of that bank. In the middle is Jacqueline Poe. She's the Managing Director of Economic Development Board, which is considered the economic brain of the country. It's what brings in very big companies into the country by offering them a place, tax incentives, and other kinds of incentives to come and make their regional headquarters Singapore. And I interviewed them not only on AI, but on public-private partnership. Because you see, Singapore has a very collaborative approach towards developing AI. And they often consult the leaders of the industries. And Sushan spoke about how AI was being used within the framework provided by the government, whether it is subsidies for talent, whether it is the right investment in compute infrastructure, whether it is actually having guidelines for the governance of AI. And Jacqueline talked about everything they're going to do to create more subsidies, bring in the right talent, bring in companies like OpenAI. OpenAI chose Singapore as its regional hub and has opened an office there. And how they are working together and talking all the time. So whether it is the bank providing customized, personalized bank services, or having personalized healthcare, or having robots, all of this comes together in practical applications. Another thing that's very important is that Asia, and ASEAN in particular, Southeast Asia, is diverse. It has a lot of languages. We have a lot of ethnicities, and we love this diversity. But the large language models that are being created in the West, they're not really sensitive to the cultural differences between Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. And so Singapore invested in a sea lion large language model. And the purpose of this is so that you can use this to actually have conversations that are respectful of cultural nuances. And I know that matters a lot in New Zealand as well. And one of the things that I love about this country is its emphasis on respecting and also celebrating diversity. So that is the kind of anchors that we need a smart nation to have. The second thing is nurturing AI talent. Now that's very important. And there are many ways to do this. One way is to make sure that your city, your region, or your country is creating an engine through which all of your people are actually learning about AI. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that all of you know what a large language model is, or all of you know what data engineering is. You can if you want, but you don't have to thrive with AI. You need to know how you can apply it to your business, to your government agency. So there are programs like the AI Apprenticeship Program. This is really for AI engineers, where I know lots of them, by the way, who were picked through interviewing by the Singapore government and exposed to real problems. And they get stipends up to 5,500 Singapore dollars a month sometimes. Then there's TESA. TESA is a tech skills accelerator. And it's as available for people in their 20s as it is for people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. On any given day, you might go to a mall in Singapore, and you'll see the robots cleaning everywhere. And if you go to a restaurant, you might see a robot come and serve you your food on a tray. But you'll also see these big signs that say, are you over 55? Are you over 60? Do you want a subsidized course on AI to plan out your next career phase? So that's really important. Because ageism, we can do away with ageism in an age of AI. I believe that all of us can be youthful and wise, which is the combination of being young and being middle-aged and a little older. And we can really actually find our place. There was this one person who told me that he used to work at a large airline company, and he said, Ayesha, when the engines would come down, we would be the ones who would try to fix them and figure out how to fix them. But then the AI can do it now because it has sensors, so it knows and can predict when the engine is going to fail. And so I was laid off. And then he said, but the next week, a team came from the government, and they said, for all of you who are being laid off, we will provide you paid internships at these 5, 6 companies so that you can see if you would want to move to a job at additive manufacturing, for example. And the government pays for this internship for some months. That's how much interest is taken, that no one should be left behind. And frankly speaking, in a small country, can we afford to have people left behind? Can we afford to have minorities, the senior citizens, women left behind? The answer is we cannot. In fact, we are even launching an AI for Fun program that the Prime Minister just introduced for all primary and secondary school children. So next year, they can choose to have 5 to 10 hours of elective modules. And the good thing for this is the AI is not going to give them the answers. The whole point is they get used to working with AI. Remember, you still want to learn your math. You want to learn your English. But as you grow older, you also want to know and be comfortable with AI, and most importantly, that your relationship is one in which you are in the driver's seat. That's important. You know, it's a mindset that should be inculcated earlier than later. But it's being done under a fun program so that kids are not intimidated by it, they get used to it, and they realize that they can use it to amplify their own potential and career. And I myself have been a big proponent of girls in tech. And I see a lot of women here. I'm super excited to encourage you that all of you should take some courses in AI for business, prompt engineering. It could be AI engineering itself. Whatever your interest is, there are lots of courses out there. These girls, when I first started teaching them, and I had a nonprofit for 10 years focused on girls in tech. Now I'm working on mid-career women and their education in AI. They were full of apprehension. They said, we read about AI, but we don't know if it is actually something that we can do well in. It's like a movie we're watching. And I want all of you to know right now, this is not a movie. We are all in the AI era. 10 weeks, 3 hours every Saturday. That's all it took. They are not AI engineers. They were studying accounting and business. And look at them here, presenting on AI projects, working with AI teams on how they can build solutions, from identifying mental health to actually sustainable solutions for buildings. I'm so proud of them. And I think each one of them deserves to have that confidence when it comes to AI. And finally, you can't do AI unless you have a robust infrastructure. And what is this stack that we're talking about? Obviously, it starts with your telecommunications infrastructure. That is the backbone of the AI economy. On top of that, you have your NVIDIA chips or other chips that are coming, which is why NVIDIA is one of the most valued companies in the world now. And then on top of that are your applications. So for all smart cities, you have to invest in the right infrastructure so that businesses can use this AI, government agencies can use this AI. And this is the reason why people are talking about Singapore's quiet rise in the global deep tech space. It's not a lot of show. It's all very systematic. It's a discipline of long-term thinking. And that is what we need at the smart city level. Now, The last part that I want to talk about is, it sounds all super rosy and super fabulous, and it is very optimistic, the scenario that I placed before you. And I am optimistic about AI. But you have to manage its risks as well. You cannot have a conversation about AI without having a conversation about how you'll manage its risks. You cannot, and you should not. This is a New York Times article which says, "Smile, your city is watching you." And it kind of is, right? When you put in cameras everywhere and sensors everywhere. Isn't it bad enough that all the big companies are watching us because we can't help but be on TikTok or on Facebook or on Google? But now we're going to allow our cities to put everything up there as well. They don't have to do this. I'm a proponent of it because I trust the Singapore government, and I know that they're using it in a way that increases security and quality of life. And I know this because they publicly talk about this, and they're accountable for it. That's what you need. All government agencies need to provide that assurance to their citizens. Because if you do not, then citizens will and should rebel against it. In Toronto, for example, they were trying to put together with Alphabet this smart sidewalk nation, right? There's a city, few blocks. But they were putting all the cameras and sensors, and the data was then going to Google servers to be processed. And the Canadians said that was not acceptable to them. They did not want that their data leave their country. And so the program eventually was shut down. And that is important. We all have agency. We all have a say in this. That's why we must wake up to both its benefits and also our rights in an AI world. Because if we don't, there are problems that we must then reckon with. There's an excellent documentary called Coded Bias that talks about how if we don't take care of how the data is put into an AI, and if the data is biased, then the AI is biased as well. And in particular, unfortunately, it's biased against women, against minorities, against anyone who has been historically excluded. For example, this woman, the African-American woman, worked hard, got an amazing apartment in a high-rise luxury building, but the AI stopped her at the door because the security system had a bias against her and her type of African Americans having houses in high-class luxury buildings. Now, I don't know if you've ever been stopped at an airport. I have, because sometimes the AI wouldn't recognize my brown face. Now it does. But it's not pleasant. It's very upsetting. And it's very unnecessary. And luckily, there's a way to fix it. The way to fix it is to have the right data, diverse data, that's feeding the AI. When you put diverse data in it, then you definitely don't have this problem. And that's why in leadership, on boards, you need representation from every part of your community because they are the people who notice these discrepancies. What about sustainability? I've talked so much about the benefits of using robots, of using AI, of using Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles. They don't all run on air. Every time you use AI, you speak, and it says something back to you, usually it goes to the cloud for processing. Or at least it's originally been trained on the cloud. And the cloud and AI compute needs electricity. According to some estimates, 25% of the electricity in the United States will be used by AI. 1% of global electricity will be used to power data centers. That's not sustainable. That's no way to do AI. And so we need a strategy again. For a country like New Zealand, and sustainability is one of a huge focuses here, we need, like Singapore has and just came up with, a green data center roadmap. Singapore wants to be a place where artificial intelligence can thrive, where it's governed properly and every business can use it. Every citizen can use it. But it doesn't want to do it at the expense of the planet. And so we have a green data center roadmap. It includes things like, what are the coolants in which you put the servers so that so much heat exhaust is not created? What are the ways in which you optimize the algorithms? What are the ways in which you cool the system down, the data center itself? Are you going to be using photovoltaic equipment? How are you going to create this electricity? These are all things that require discussion and should be part of a roadmap. This is very important. Like I said, for every good thing that comes out, there's a risk you need to mitigate, and luckily, there's always a way to mitigate it. And it doesn't take an AI engineer. These are logical things that you and I can talk about between ourselves, having coffee, to each other, to our teams any day. And I also want to talk about the importance of communication. You have to communicate, communicate, communicate. You have no right to put AI in things. You have no right to do things without telling people who will be exposed to it how it is being used. I want to tell you the story of one robot dog from Boston Dynamics and how it was used in 2 different places. In Singapore, it was called Spot, and the government told us that during COVID, it will be used in parks. And sure enough, I would go to the park with my kids, and there would be Spot, and if we got too close together with other people, it would say, "Excuse me, madam, you should really keep more of the 6-foot distance between each other," because it was using computer vision. And you can see that there's a kid on a rollerblade. The photographers would come and take pictures, but we knew what it was there for because we had been told repeatedly. In New York, the New York Police Department also wanted to use the same dog. They wanted to use it to send the dog into dangerous criminal places so that it could go in first in case there were some mines and protect the lives of police officers. Make sense? But did they communicate this to New Yorkers? They did not. Instead, New Yorkers were left wondering, oh my God, and they thought maybe this dog would have a gun on it. And they absolutely said, no way. They rightly said they will not accept this. And so everybody's conclusion was that the communication had been poor. So don't underestimate the people, the citizens, your consumers. Please don't be elitist. Everybody can understand AI. Logically, we can all understand it and how to apply it and what the risks are. So we have to respect the way that we communicate with them. And then, of course, the final thing is about regulation. There are 2 camps in regulation. One is the European Union, and this is Margrethe Vestager. She's amazing. I had dinner with her in Singapore, highly principled, the head of the European Union's AI Act, and fantastic. She has very strong guidelines, actually regulations for AI. And the European Union says, if it is going to affect anyone in a meaningful way, either you're not allowed to use AI, or you will be heavily audited, and if you do not do it that way, if we find you have not been careful in your governance, we will fine you 7% of your annual revenue. Now, this is considered a strict way of AI regulation. It's a top-down approach. I believe that the principles are correct. But I don't know if that is necessarily the best way to attract innovation and to create an innovative atmosphere. And these are the two camps. New Zealand would have to choose one or the other or somewhere in between. And Singapore's in between. It says, let's find a balance between innovation and regulation. When we wanted to apply AI to fintech, to financial services, we built an AI fintech sandbox. And it's kind of a bottom-up approach. Singapore has guidelines, and it even has given software that's available to all companies and government agencies to test all the risks in an AI model. It has very strict guidelines and clear guidelines for data privacy and security. And it's constantly creating AI sandboxes, which are safe places to experiment with AI without exposing them to the entire public. I actually think that these are the principles that I really admire about Singapore, but usually Singaporeans don't say that. We always say we have a long way to go, and I think we do in Singapore also. We learn so much and travel all over the world to learn from other countries, and our government officials are always bringing back what they've learned from countries like New Zealand and trying to implement it. And I believe that a smart city is fundamentally about empowering citizens with empathy, with equity, and with ethics. And when you do that, you can take the best from the world, and you can take the best from your great country and use it to elevate your citizen experience and develop an AI-empowered economy. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Ayesha Khanna. I think my mind is blown, even just from the very beginning, thinking as an Aucklander about a car-free neighbourhood, right? Thank you for all your questions. We've got some really great ones. One that has come up repeatedly is around privacy concerns. Yes. And I guess you talked about the government needs to be open about what they're gathering and why, but how else do we address the people who don't want to be monitored, who want to sunbathe nude in their backyard and not think that the government's recording it?
I think that's a very complicated question, because if you have the majority of a population, a democracy, that is okay with something and has given the elected leaders the right to do it, then you will actually have AI in those regions and cities. So one way that one can imagine in the future is that there will be AI-free zones, such as you have Wi-Fi-free zones as well. One can also advocate in the current situation, if your government agency is doing it, and demand that they show you where they're keeping the data. I can tell you government agencies are very particular. If you're frustrated with a government agency, you need to know one of the reasons they're moving slower than a big corporation is because they're being so careful. And we want them to be careful. So I actually think that there should be clear guidelines at a policy level, and all government agencies should publicly declare how they're using the data.
We also know that they're human, right? They're run by humans and they make mistakes. I think just a recent example in New Zealand was the IRD, which collects our taxes. I think uploaded some data to Facebook to target their advertising, and it wasn't anonymized. So how do we put the checks and balances in to make sure that they're not just being slow, they are being careful?
Okay, so this is a really good point. In Singapore, for example, at some point, whatever industry we're focusing on, we start to get experts. So I started noticing, I was on the board of some of the government agencies, they started hiring AI experts. AI PhDs, AI scientists, and they combined them with policymakers because they wanted the right expertise at the table. This example would not have happened if there was a process and somebody qualified to look at it. Because the problem is if you don't upskill your teammates and you don't have the right advisors or employees who know are experts, then you may have these kind of mistakes. So the key is hire the experts or advisors, upskill yourself, and then have rigorous systems. You know, I'm a big believer in boring is beautiful because you need to sometimes have fabulous ideas in AI, but to make them work, you need to be very disciplined in your processes. And that also saves you from accidents.
Which I think does bring up the issue of education.
Yes.
And you talked about what the Singaporean government is doing to upskill the population. Is that just the government's responsibility, or should the businesses who are harnessing AI also be investing in ensuring their people can take the leap to move beyond those low-level jobs to the ones where the value is going to be?
Yeah, 100%. Look, the government is there in public education. Us as parents and as individuals, we need to also take ownership of our own education. And for businesses, the worst mistake you can make is, oh, I've got this AI here, now I don't need this person, so I'll let them go. Remember, nobody understands your business, your clients, their problems, your culture, your strategy better than your employees. So use AI. Assistants teach them how to work with AI so they get 20% better and have 20% more time to work on other clients and expanding the business. I'll give you the example of JP Morgan. JP Morgan is one of the largest banks in the world. Jamie Dimon has said, no matter who joins the firm, whether it is the most junior intern or the next CEO herself or himself, everyone must take an AI engineering course. That doesn't mean they need to learn AI, but they need to learn how to prompt and work with an AI. And as a basic course, I'd recommend all of you at least start with that.
Which addresses with those in the workforce, but you mentioned Singapore's aging population.
Yes.
That's true of a lot of countries around the world, including New Zealand. There's a question here from Milton. How do you bring the older generations along with you as technology moves fast?
So we have these digital labs for the elderly where we have government employees or volunteers, and we teach them, and that's if they're over 85, we teach them how to use iPads, and there are lots of silver programs which are specifically on teaching lots of things: music, creativity, painting, and AI, and how to work with digital for senior citizens. And that is very useful to them because then they can do a couple of things. They can stay in touch with their families who are far away. They can get telehealth medicine help. They can also use it to remind themselves of their different tasks for the day. But if you're younger, and even if you're 85 these days, you're kind of young, you can actually take courses on new kinds of jobs that may be available. Now, someone told me, for example, that one of the places where the elderly can never work is construction, right? But imagine if you have robots, and we're not doing this in Singapore yet, but imagine you have lots of robots doing construction. Well, then a grandmother can operate that robot as well if she actually knows the basic principles. We just need to switch the way we think. We need to switch from, oh my God, it's going to take our jobs, to hell no, I can do 10 other kinds of jobs till I'm 95. And I think that's the democratization between all ages, all countries, all ethnicities, rich and poor. That's what excites me if we have the right attitude.
Speaking of construction, there's a question here about property development, which in New Zealand is primarily a private enterprise. And you showed us that wonderful example of the new neighbourhood with the autonomous vehicles and the like. But how do you get developers that are profit-driven to invest in a futuristic neighbourhood that might embrace AI? How do you ensure the incentives are there to do that?
Well, there are two ways to do incentives. The first one is that it should be obvious why using artificial intelligence is useful to real estate companies. Just look at facilities management, right? It takes you so much effort to actually answer calls, people have complaints, to be knowing how much energy is spending, what is not working, the lift is not working. Artificial intelligence can do a lot of this work. So people are most motivated, and I think that's totally fine. You should be by your business outcomes. So immediately, as a businessman or businesswoman in real estate, there are many benefits that can come. Then, if you have other kinds of things that are really citizen benefits, then the government can give subsidies to enhance that. But I think there's way fat in real estate at the moment that can be reduced and increase profitability just by using artificial intelligence from everywhere, from IoT that cools the building to actually facilities management to customer care.
There's a great question here that would be a good one to end on, I think, from Isaac. You've talked about how communication is imperative in AI implementation. How does Singapore ensure comprehensive communication to all its residents? Because look, we live in a society where people get their information in a variety of sources. It's really hard to reach some sectors of the population.
Yeah, this is a very good point. Like, how do you reach certain sectors of the population? And really, everything is available in multiple languages. We have 3 official languages in Singapore, which is Mandarin, English, Mandarin, and Malay. And also, we have Telugu as well. So we think it's very important to have the same information in multiple languages. But apart from this, you have to have targeted approaches and advocacy to take that message to different communities. Whether it's for the elderly, we have targeted volunteers and targeted government agencies that go after that. Community to explain to them digitization. You can have the same thing for minorities also. You have to advocate because inclusivity and diversity has to be one of your principles for deploying AI in a smart city.
Your presentation was fantastic, and I'm delighted we're going to be sitting down with you again after lunch on our panel. But in the meantime, please put your hands together for Dr. Ayesha Khanna.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.